Hey, everybody. Looks like we're slowly rolling in on this Tuesday morning. All right. We'll wait for a few more to join, and then we'll kick it off. I think last I checked, we have 22 countries or something in this list. So a great showing of folks. Okay. Hey guys, I'm going to start to kick it off. I know a lot of people register for these things and frankly watch them recorded anyway, so I won't drag on the beginning. Hey, first I want to thank the Entrepreneurship Network for putting this together. I've had a ton of questions over the last year of equity crowdfunding as it's, a somewhat new way to raise capital in the startup world. And I just had a ton of interest from YPOers on how to do such a thing and get it going. So thanks for the Entrepreneurship Network for putting this together. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Forte. I've been a YPOer for almost 20 years. My qualifying business was a company called Ascendant Systems in Palo Alto. I have 17 patents in mobile and telecommunications, and BlackBerry actually bought that company. So if any of you had that cool little device, some of that technology was mine. So since I've run startups, public companies, private companies from zero to $1 billion P&L, both in the US and abroad and throughout Asia. I worked for a while as an operating partner in private equity as well. On kind of the YPO side, I was chair of the technology network for multiple years, in addition to other business networks over time. Chaired several chapters and gone through the latter, like many of you, and I'm founding my second chapter right now in Lake Tahoe. So any of you that are interested in Lake Tahoe and kind of the north region of California, invite you to join. It's going to be a fun secondary chapter. In addition, I want to shout out that we're doing an MIT executive education event coming on. If you're interested, check it out. We have a couple of slots open. We just expanded the registration. That's a deep tech dive in AI and other things. And we're also hosting for the Art Network a Art Basel VIP experience. So I have to plug a couple of other events we have going on. So I'm now building an AI tech startup in the building materials space, and that's what kind of brought me to crowdfunding. And what I'll do is I'll roll through a bit of a presentation, if you don't mind, so I can go through some of the details, and then at the end we'll do a lot of Q&A. So anyone has any questions and things, we can roll through it. So look, this whole world started with this Jobs Act. And I tell you what, let me share my screen and get a chance for everyone to see what's going on. Okay, looks like that should be visible. So it's been a pretty interesting journey along the way. And as a historical context, the US kind of started early with the 1933 Securities Act. And the premise was, because of the crash of 1929, they wanted to put some guardrails into what kind of investments were public. So many people would have a bit of a premise when you invest in a public company that someone's looked at it, that it's actually for real, that they might have the assets. So they created a lot of restrictions for smaller companies. It became very difficult and frankly expensive to get listed. So here comes the Jobs Act of 2012, signed by President Obama. The idea was to create a more streamlined process for small companies to get capital. And a key part of that Jobs Act was Title III. And there are two approvals that were given in the Jobs Act. One is the Regulation CF, which is the regulation crowdfunding, and the second is a Reg A. So all this was put together in 2012. However, a lot of it really didn't get traction until 2016. And that's kind of when a lot of these amendments and things came through that allowed companies to sign these. And in doing so, what it did is it made a couple of requirements, and I'll focus today really on the Reg CF. That's what I'm registered with my company, Build Club. And the Reg crowdfunding means that you do still have to file your financials with the SEC. However, you are not required to get approval from the SEC. They don't necessarily have to review your financials or your filing like an S1, like you would in a public company. There are some investor limits. Most importantly, you have to use a funding portal. So you can't go out. I can't right now and just blast, advertise, and solicit Build Club shares to the public and have them send me a check. It all has to go through the like Start Engine or WeFunder or one of the other platforms. So that's kind of a restriction within the Reg CF. And we have to file public financials annually. So the difference with the Reg A, and by the way, the limit on that, if you hadn't noticed, is about 5 million bucks you can raise, and they're continuing to up these. So from that perspective, with a reviewed financials, you can raise up to 1.2 million, and with audited financials, you can raise up to 5. So I'll talk a little bit about my campaign, what we did, and I'll frankly show you some of our numbers. So we went into this with reviewed financials. We then capped out at 1.2 million, then got our financials audited, and are proceeding now to start for a $5 million raise, or a total of 5, should I say. That includes the 1.2. So the Reg A's are allowed to raise more money, as you can see. The difference is they have to do financials twice a year instead of once a year. And the SEC review essentially is almost like an S1. So they have to go through your filing materials and have some sort of comments. And you can, in that case, on the Reg A's, solicit yourself. So if you wanted to advertise, hey, buy shares in Build Club, in this case, if I was Reg A approved, then I can actually have them email me a check and I can put in our cap table that we sold these. So it took some years for this whole thing to pull together, but they really now kind of solidified the market, and it's been gaining significant traction. And I think the one thing you'll find with many things digital, it all really started to gain a lot of momentum around COVID time. So here's a snapshot in the market, and you can see both in valuation in terms of, say, roughly $16 billion worth of raise happening right now, and what the average valuation is of the company going public. There's a big lift here, as you can tell, after around the COVID time. So it's really been a very dynamic market. I know a lot of people think of the crowdfunding being more like an Indiegogo program where you might pre-sell, I guess the case that is, a product, right? Buy my widget now and I'll give you an extra accessory with the widget when I finally make the widget. And this is obviously quite a bit different. And the level of sophistication of companies here is growing substantially. And the amount of money companies are raising, frankly, is growing substantially. So raise activity as well has been fairly robust. You can see the amount of dollars that have gone into this thing. Interesting, the cycles, if you look at it from the time frame, it's kind of funny to see, but it's certainly been growing. Again, a lot of this has been happening since after the COVID time. But so right now, I guess we're looking at just almost 500 raises that are in the market, which really makes you realize, too, that the market's really still in its infancy. It's really quite tiny. So the two main platforms that are being used right now, predominantly for the Reg CF and Reg A, are WeFunder and Start Engine. You can notice the difference in spread on what they're offering. So you can see the significant number of SAFE transactions that are happening in WeFunder. For those of you who don't know, a SAFE is a simple agreement for future equity. It's an investment instrument that's not debt or equity. It's basically kind of an IOU that whenever they do raise money at a priced valuation, that SAFE rolls in almost like a convertible note would. So I think that's probably it's a great vehicle, by the way, for getting investment if you expect to have a priced round and a VC or someone else implement later. If you're not, then maybe it's not the right vehicle for that. But it's interesting, the different spread between the platforms. So the three key platforms are these folks here. In choosing the one, we kind of went with Start Engine for a few reasons. They had a larger investor base. They had acquired Seed Invest about I think it's about 6-9 months ago, and have integrated that. They have about 1.2 million or so investors. Maybe it's 1.7 now. I'd have to check with Howard. And plus, the founder is a YPOer. So I thought, you know what, I've got a backdoor. If something goes wrong, if I need something, I need some help on some sort of process, then I can reach out to Howard. So it's been actually an interesting experience, and I'll talk a bit more detail how all that came together. So what's this look like? Well, there's a bit of a timeline on getting a company ready to do this launch. And there's lots of things that have to happen, as you can imagine. Your financials, whether you're doing them audited or approved in terms of a review, the Form C approval takes a bit of time. You work on that with the platform. They help you draft that document, and then you submit that to the SEC. You do have to create a special landing page, and I'll talk a bit about that for the campaign. Video is critical because anyone who's interested in investing in the business typically clicks on a short video and wants to see what's going on. Keying up your social accounts, having a funnel of social media updates, things are always important. And then selecting the vendors is key, frankly. Having the right companies around you to support the campaign, because it's kind of a big deal. It can suck your eyeballs out in time, and I'll explain a bit how that rolls through. So I kind of see this as a comfortable window being 3 months. Some companies I've seen do it in about 30 days. It again depends on how much of a gun you have to your head, how quick you are, and you may want to iterate through that landing page and spend a bit of time getting things right. So some of the prep, I say it's more prepping your mind. There's a lot of things I kind of had an aha moment. By the way, I knew absolutely nothing about equity crowdfunding when I jumped into this. So I had to kind of drink from the fire hose. In addition, I made it a point of reaching out to 4 or 5 successful, frankly, cold calls, successful campaigns that had raised over $1 million. And I also reached out to 3 or 4 failed campaigns, companies that raised 100, maybe 150, 200,000. And I wanted to understand the difference between them. So one of the keys I found is that you're really selling a new product. Your product is your company, isn't it? Are shares of investment. And that took a little time to sink in because it means you've got a whole new product category, a whole new advertising line, and frankly, a lot of work to do. So the brand and the founder are the story. That's what people really invest in. They want to know, do you understand the market? Are you excited? What's your competitive positioning? And who's your team? Who's the founder? And that's really what they're backing. Like they say, kind of backing the jockey here. So you do have to allocate a significant amount of time. This thing isn't something you can do in 2-3 hours a week. It really takes a ton of effort. There's a constant rhythm of having to do updates, follow up, maybe answer questions that are asked on the portal. As you know, in your businesses, sometimes it's very easy for a week or two to slide when your head's down working on a product, either developing software or have challenges operationally internally. And you can't do that with these campaigns. They go stale instantly, and then you'll start maybe getting bad comments in the chat. You do have to be patient and persistent. I was really frustrated early on. We got kind of a little bit of a slow start. And, I didn't know if this thing's going to die. Is it going to keep going? Do I just keep beating a dead horse and going after it and advertising? And then it did start to continually gain its momentum and has done quite well since. So bringing other investors to the platform is key as well. So if you have folks that are interested in your business and you do want to do this, I suggest you kind of accumulate them beforehand, including friends and family, and frankly yourself. I put a little bit in my own campaign to kind of keep it going and seed it in the early days. Because look, at the end of the day, everyone wants to go to the nightclub that has a line outside, right? They don't want the nightclub that's empty to walk in. So you have to create a little bit of momentum and show that there are other investors and money coming into the project. You do adjust as you go on. So we actually launched our campaign originally with a minimum investment of $248. We kicked through there, got going up to, I think we got to about the million mark or 1,000,001. And at that point, we renewed our campaign. We got our financials audited and upped our investment to 492. And the reason that dollar amount is important is, again, your investing shares are a product. So when you have your product, you have to think of customer acquisition cost. So if your CAC is, $170 or $160 to bring in that investment customer, and your minimum investment is 248, you're not getting a really good yield. And yield is a big deal, and I'll talk a little bit about that on how that falls into the valuation of the business. So it's something to think about. And some of these companies have sustained campaigns for years, and I'll show you an example of that in a bit. So you can continue to run these campaigns. There are some out there that have run 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 million through this by successive campaigns. They start to build this network of followers. The campaigns that tend to do best, by the way, are those that have some type of following, if you want to call it that, some sort of group or cohort that they can reach out to invest. So before launching and all this stuff, you have to build your vendor team. So we did that. For accountants, we hired two different firms. So the Set Apart Financial Company I hired to do the audit, and the original review I had done by Mongio. Both these firms actually were great for us. They did a fantastic job. They were super fast. They were dialed in. And by the way, at the end of this presentation, I'll give you a link where you can click and fill in any of the vendors I've mentioned that you'd like a referral to. I'll be doing a YPO introduction to the CEOs of the firms if you'd like to talk to any of these folks. So at the very end, you'll have a chance to get all the contact information. I'll make those introductions because I've had a lot of interest in people who want to be able to find the vendors, because sometimes finding the vendor is the hard part. So I use a company called OmniKey that's been taking care of our ads. These guys are fantastic at not only building the creative of the ads, but running the campaign. And I'll talk a bit about these campaigns, but most are in Facebook and Instagram. Those tend to be the key you need to focus on, especially in the early days. The other channels, such as Google or omnichannel stuff, they just don't yield so much TikTok. It's really Facebook that drives it. So I use a second firm called the DNA Agency that handles a lot of my content. So these guys also run some ads because I do like to hedge my bets a bit. Each one of those firms actually run on different pixels. So if you're familiar with digital marketing, the pixel is kind of the audience, if you want to call it that. So in the case of OmniKey, they get the audience directly from Start Engine. So Start Engine has a partnership with them. They share the audience. So with OmniKey, I can target specifically people that they have on that Start Engine pixel, which is key because, frankly, 2/3 of our investors came from existing Start Engine pool. And I'll show you where on your dashboard you can figure that out. But it's an important thing to note. So we're not necessarily bringing in brand new people who've never heard of, say, Start Engine or Crowd CF funding. The majority of our investors in this campaign are folks who are already familiar and already registered with the platform. So DNA has been great at that. They do our blog articles, they do our content, they also do some creative. So that's worked out quite well for us. From our investment page, and I'll show you a snapshot of that in a bit, I found some creatives on Upwork that did a great job on the infographics. Again, it has to be very visual. All of us have ADD, so having a long landing page of text just doesn't work. None of us want to read it, right? We want to look at pictures. Frankly, it's something we carried on, I think, from kindergarten. SEO has been critical for me as well. I don't know about any of you, but I've really struggled in the past on search engine optimization, not just for my campaign, but also for products and other components. These guys have been magicians, and I'll show you a piece of this. They've been absolutely fabulous on not only doubling our domain rating, which is key, by the way, for your search engine optimization, is how high your domain rating is. They've added thousands of backlinks for us, in addition to a massive uptick in keywords. And I'll show you a graph of some of the work they've done. So they're fabulous, and we use them both for product and for our campaign. Crowd is a company that actually runs as like an analyst firm for startups. So if you haven't been on that site, I encourage you to go to kingscrowd.com. These folks, you can go in there, get a small subscription, and you can actually track the entire crowdfunding world. And each one of the companies in the crowdfunding universe have a profile on there, almost like you would any analytics platform on your investment portal. So it's pretty cool being able to pull that up, and I'll show you what ours looks like on there. They also have a small fund they just started a couple of years ago, and it just turns out, lucky for us, we were their largest investment in 2023, and I actually had no idea these guys actually made investments, but they do have a fund, and they find ones that they like, I guess, like us, and they put a big chunk of money in. So it's been great having them on board as well. But it's a great resource for you as you want to dig in and understand the market a little better. So I'll shift over to the campaign page. So campaign page is key. It's really about having this concise overview, like any marketing piece, everything that you need, explain what you do, how it works, how it comes together. Can someone understand it in a couple of seconds? And obviously, why you? There are a lot of different startups doing a lot of different things. There may be something on the platform that's doing exactly what you do already. And if that's the case, then clearly you want to be able to differentiate yourself in some way. And then having the numbers, what matters? Are you adding customers? Or do you have investment? How many patents do you have? What's your sales growth? Whatever your metric is. And the interesting thing is, you're really marketing a story. There's a 3D printing company I always use as an example. I didn't put them here because I didn't want to name them per se, but I think they've raised 5, 6, 7, $8 million on Start Engine. They don't even have a product. And if you really dig in and you look at the founders, I think it was like two kids first year out of school, don't have a product. It's kind of all idea, but they've done such a great job marketing. They raised a lot of money at a reasonable valuation. So it can be quite useful. So here's a snapshot of our campaign page. And you can see here with this that we have the video goes in the upper right corner. If you've already been on, say, a Start Engine page, you kind of get how this works. And I chose, like I'd mentioned, I'd changed this minimum investment piece up to 492. It's nice that we're now flagged as like the most funded. These milestones matter. People look at these on the campaign, and the campaign also sends out a lot of different notices and reminders. So there's a big deal to this, and I'll kind of share a couple of slides on this as well. But getting the platform to market you is critical. So this is an example of a different campaign I started. Look what these guys raised. So they've done several different raises now. They're up to almost 15 million. They are shipping product, but again, it's just not like an Indiegogo, raise a couple $100,000 and go away. You could really make this kind of platform your pure equity funding. By the way, I'll add a comment as well that it doesn't have to be your only channel. So we've also raised money off platform. So you can have this campaign going, but still have other interested VC, angel, or other investors who can invest in your company either through direct equity as an angel investor, obviously not just through the campaign, but also do convertible debt or a SAFE. So you're not limited to only going through this channel. And I think that flexibility is great. I will say that some VCs don't necessarily like it because they think it makes the cap table messy, but I guess that's just one of the issues you go with. And the valuations tend to be a little higher on the platforms. And I'll kind of explain why that matters when I go forward. So there are other things called campaign updates that we do along the way. So you kind of don't just sit on the platform and hope people knock on the door with your advertisements, but you continually ping the environment with usually around 3 updates per week on something going on in the business. And you kind of don't want a bunch of BS. It's really, what milestone have you created? Did you close a new deal? Did you have a great meeting? Have you gone a step further to getting a patent? It's really what else is going on in the business to keep excitement, to keep it notable, and frankly, to be top of mind. Surprising to me, a lot of the investors you may tend to get on the platform to come back and invest again. So if you have great updates, things are going cool within your business and people are excited, the person who put in $800 or something last month might come back and put in $2,000. So it's interesting to see that there's actually a bit of kind of remarketing to many folks. In some cases, we'll talk about older announcements we did months ago, and that's because we may now have hundreds more followers than we did then. And most people don't dig into the history. So if you have someone who starts following, say, Build Club today, I may go back out and talk about, our Air Force contract or some milestone or something that we had, a few months back, because they probably haven't seen it and it may have just disappeared from the platform. So here's a sample of what the updates page looks like, and I'll kind of let it scroll through so you can see. And as you scroll down the page, this is what, a typical person on the platform would see. What's going on with Build Club? They can click into it. They can learn more. Maybe there's a video attached. Maybe it's just text, could be an ad. So this kind of thing becomes very important. That's what people look for to see what's going on within the company. Is it making traction? Is it moving along? So campaign advertising is really what runs the whole thing. It's really, like I say, selling a product. It's an ad campaign. You're going to get your first boost out of the gate from your friends and family and people you've teed up. And after that, it can kind of drop like a rock. So you have to keep the campaign ads going. Facebook and Instagram, like I'd mentioned, are really the key platforms everybody uses for crowdfunding. By the way, we spent a decent chunk of change experimenting with TikTok, experimenting with Google and others. It was pretty much wasted. The only direct, return on investment we've gotten is from Google, I'm sorry, from Facebook and Instagram. Google, we do
Okay.
some small ads, but it just might be a brand advertising. So if someone in our case, Google's Build Club, that maybe that ad will pop up and allow them to get directly to our site. So a lot of companies tend to explore the kind of omni-channel stuff a little bit later in their campaign. And we spend about anywhere from 20 to 30 grand a month. And it winds up being a portion of what you raise. So something to think about if you get involved in this is your valuation of the business has to make sense that you're selling, because it's going to cost you money to raise money. And in most instances I've seen, it's about a 3 or a 4-to-1 ratio, meaning for every $100 you raise, it's going to cost you $25. And you got to kind of put that into your mechanism of what that dilution really is and where the cash goes. So it's important to consider the costs, because again, you're advertising for each one of these. So a snapshot on life cycle. In the early days, of course, launch is exciting. Things go out, you raise some money, you've got your friends and family, they're banged in. Now your community starts to go, all the customers. In our case, we have like 78,000 registered customers. So we're able to blast them, get them to invest, and that's all great. And then you start getting to the difficult times, right? Which is typically the trough in the center. And trying to get momentum through there becomes a little difficult. There were a few times, I think, in the months in between where I just started putting a little money in myself just to get the momentum. I didn't want the investment to go 3 days or 2 days without having, at least a couple of grand come in. And I didn't want to flatten that curve. So it's important to kind of also have a little bit of a war chest for yourself to invest in yourself, but also keep the momentum going in the business. And of course, the closings tend to be big because that's where the FOMO starts. So when you start saying, hey, closing, going away, campaign ends in 3 days, then a lot of people who've been sitting on the sidelines tend to jump in and get involved at that point. And then obviously you do a big kind of advertising push and kick out then. So it's something to think about that you have to. And again, when I've talked to these other companies, most of the ones that had failed just really hadn't managed their campaigns. They published the campaign on the platform and expected everybody to come running and everyone to beat to their door, and that the platform would do the advertising, and they don't. They really are just what they say, and that's a platform. Although having access to their kind of registered users and investors is important. And I'll talk a little bit where that comes from. So we also do webinars, and typically in this case, you want to do them around once a month, once every 6 weeks. We focus on different topics. Sometimes we bring somebody else in, so it's not just me talking like I'm doing now, and get a chance for other people to talk about our products and what we're doing in the market. We tend to cut those up later for short video updates that we can use both in the updates and as advertisements on Facebook and Instagram. So that tends to work. And it also keeps investors engaged, helps tell the story. Again, just keeping momentum under this tends to be key. We do this live. And when you're live, there are compliance issues I'll mention. So you kind of have to be careful. You don't talk about forward planning of sales. We cannot talk on the webinar otherwise about the offering. We can't discuss the price. We can't discuss the terms. So typically, those are things you avoid. When you're done with the webinar, we immediately make the transcript. We send it through to Start Engine. They review for compliance. And in many cases, they make edits. And they say, okay, we'll let you post the webinar to your portal. However, you need to maybe cut out this little piece here where you talked about exit strategy or something that doesn't meet compliance requirements. So keep that in mind. You'll need to edit it before you post it. There's some kind of sneaky ways around it, frankly. So we typically have an unedited version of the webinar we put on YouTube. And there's inevitably always one investor who asks me in the chat on Start Engine, hey, can you post the webinar? And in that case, I can. So in the chat, I can just send them a YouTube link. Doesn't need to be reviewed. It's kind of a backdoor under compliance, you might say. But to have it actually posted officially in the portal, it needs to go through compliance. So there's still some ways to kind of have a casual conversation behind the scenes. So an important piece as well are these platform promotions. So when you hit certain milestones, many of these platforms will promote you, which is fabulous. So if you raise more than 250,000 in 7 days, in this case, Start Engine will send an email to all 1.x million of their investors. And let me tell you, it matters. We see a huge uptick whenever Start Engine sends an email for us. We probably raise maybe to 4 to 5x our average for the week. So it's a wonderful boost that doesn't cost you any money. So anything you can do to orchestrate to hit these milestones, At 150,000, you get a boost. New 2,500 followers, update of the week. So they select every week in a a platform update that gets the most engagement. Now, it's a bit of a black box on what that really means. I mean, I assume it's click-throughs on email or on your update. But if you get that, then they send out an email as well, and they kind of highlight your update. When you hit $1 million or 2 million or 3 million, you get one as well. So it's pretty good. I don't have a whole lot to talk about on the ad side, but I mean, look, it's like any other digital marketing effort. You have to continually refresh, do A/B testing, and figure out which performs. The funniest thing is when I sit with both of these firms and we've put together the creative. I don't know how many times you all have done this, but you submit an ad and you're just convinced that this new ad is going to be just the kick-ass ad that's going to bring everybody in. It is never the case. The most successful click-through ad I've had on all of my campaigns are never, ever my first choice. They're always some rando that I had no idea why it's popular, but it works. So I encourage you to do the A/B testing because you get a lot of surprises. The selfies are popular. So having the founder just talk to the camera and say, hey, we just closed this deal. It's pretty awesome. We're excited about XYZ that's happening in the business. A lot of people really like that personal interaction. So things seem a little less corporate. And then, like I'd mentioned about A/B testing. So this is a dashboard I get from OmniKey. This is the firm that's doing a lot of our creative and a lot of our Google ads. And you can say that they give me these metrics every day, which, these matter. So I'm able to track this on a very granular basis. What's my investment? Again, I'm showing my company numbers. So this is what we're spending. A typical ROAS might be between 6, 7, 8. So that's a return on ad spend. So I think our average ROAS right now is in the 6 to 7, which is pretty good. There are some campaigns that are 10. I'd love to get there. Maybe we will. If I were to do an all-in, kind of frankly, open kimono cost, what does the whole thing cost me? I'm probably at a 3.5, maybe 4, meaning that, again, for every $4 I raise, it costs me $1. So it's something, again, you have to map into your valuation and your thought process on raising the cash. So this is their approval portal that OmniKey sends me, and they'll list all the ads, the videos, other stuff that they're creating for me in creative. I'm able to go through the portal. So I find this just a super clean and easy way for me to review what I need to look at and what I need to do. So it's just a super great kind of professionalized process. I work with my ads with these guys because, again, this is happening week over week. Every week we're making new ads, we're making new content. So there has to be process and a portal and a system to it, or you'll just be buried in email. This is a dashboard I have from DNA Agency. So I get this kind of detailed list here of all my metrics on the ads. They show me the ads that are working, the ads that aren't working. I get all the kind of financial metrics. So again, it's important. And they both kind of fill a different function for me. I think some companies use just one or the other. I found actually using both to be very useful because I get a lot of like deep content out of the DNA Agency with the blogs, the advertising. They also draft all of my email updates, all of my portal updates. They typically send me a link on monday.com or something, and I'll go through and review the Google Docs. I'll look at their language. If there's anything I want them to adjust, which, there is from time to time, I'll add it to comments. They'll redraft and send it back. So it's a very efficient process because I obviously as a startup founder, I can't just suck up my entire day raising money. I need to actually develop product. So it's been very useful for me in this process. And OmniKey has been the same. So this is an example of using the CapConvert system. So these guys have done an amazing job, and you can look at the uptick. The top graph is our domain authority, and we went from somewhere like around a 20 up to 50 in a very short period of time, like in a couple of months. And if you can look at the ramp in keywords, again, that's key from search engine optimization. So they've done just an amazing job at getting us noticed online because, again, when it comes to your products or the campaign, it's like free advertising getting on there. So if any of you Google Build Club today with a space or without a space, your first 2, 3, 4 pages are going to be us. And that's pretty good, especially for such a generic name. So these guys have done just an amazing amount of work. This is a sample of the King's Crowd page. So I mentioned to you, King's Crowd is that company that is like an analyst firm. So you can see here they show for the investments a snapshot of their start date, how they've raised, how much they've raised, what regulation they've filed. They rank them too, by the way. We're lucky enough to have a 4.9 ranking. In order to get that ranking, we had to submit a ton of material. They wanted our financials, they wanted details, they wanted to understand the business. It was a bit of a, I guess, an analyst audit, if you want to call it that. So we were super happy to get that rating and plus their investment. But don't forget, if you list, to make sure that you've thought about King's Crowd, how you're listing there, because again, a lot of the avid investors go there and they've become kind of a voice in the market and they're pretty important. So this is a snapshot of my campaign page. So within the Start Engine platform, I click into this, at least a few times a week. And you can see all the different metrics here. And one of the things I'll kind of point out is the followers. So you can see you add followers almost like a social media account every day, every week, and communicating to these people become key. So you can see in the last, let's take a look here. In the last 4 weeks, we've had maybe 200, almost 300 new followers. Well, those people probably hadn't seen any of the updates we did 6 weeks ago. So I may need to refresh those in an update or restate it in a different way and post it back to my campaign so that those people get a chance to see some of the excitement we've maybe already talked about. So you'll look to the left and you'll notice that there's also some different components where we can submit our updates. We can look at a funds breakdown and other components. So I'll show you that next. So I can look into a funds breakdown and say, all right, how much has been dispersed, how much is in progress and going to be dispersed, what investments do we have? So you'll tend to reference this a lot. And again, this is all managed by the platform, which keeps everything straightforward. Now, distributions are a bit different. So let's talk about the money. How do you get the cash? So you have to submit to the platform to get your money. So they take the investment, an investor comes online, they order via credit card, ACH, they send a wire. Depends. We have people who've done all the above. All that money goes into an escrow account. And then every roughly 2-ish weeks, you can submit to the platform and ask for a disbursement. So a few things happen. In a typical disbursement, they'll send an email out to everyone who invested and say, by the way, your investment is about to be solidified. If you want to pull out, you can click here and reverse your investment, get a refund, whatever. So that's kind of a passive, I guess you might call, confirmation. If you have to make any changes in your filing, if you have to have a material update in your business, or you want to extend the campaign, this is a big one, right? Because each campaign, by the way, typically goes about 6-8 weeks. So if you want to continue and extend, you have to meet certain requirements. You have to be raising, I think for Start Engine, it's around 20,000 a month. And if you're raising less than 20 or 30,000 a month, they may not allow you to extend because, of course, they want to curate successful campaigns. So in order to file that extension and extend that campaign, say another 2 months, you have to do this kind of material update. And in that case, if you have any investors pending, they require an active confirmation. Now that means they're going to send an email to all of those investors and say, click here if you still want to invest. And if they don't hear from those investors, it gets wiped out. You never get it. It gets reversed. So that one's a bitch. That piece I try to avoid. So what we try and do is make sure we draw down everything on the campaign we possibly can before we file an extension or before we file any sort of amendment, because as you can imagine, you wind up losing maybe 15% of the investors that you have just because they maybe don't respond, they don't get back, they change their mind, who knows. So something to think about when you make these material changes. So cap table is one of the things I was concerned about when I put this together. I'm like, man, how's that going to work? So Start Engine gives you an ability to see all of your investors. So you'll notice here on the left, I have that highlighted here. So you'll see that this one, let me see if I can get a laser through here. This shows the people that have already closed. And for it to be in this invested side, I pretty much have to have already drawn down the money. And the non-closed, of course, is that. And I can download these and then you can load them in a different platform. So this has been pretty useful. It's a snapshot. I use a company now called Mantle. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a small startup that's doing cap table management. We used to use Carta, and I got real sick of them and their fees. They wanted to charge us $9,000 for cap table management. By the way, not including crowdfunding. So these guys are charging us, I think it's about $100 or something like that a month, and unlimited investors. So what you see here in my cap table are my existing investors that I have. And we're going to be adding our, I think, 804 crowdfunding investors shortly. And we'll just manage them here on the same platform. So it'll make it very, very easy to manage and go forward. So look, in wrap up, before we get to a little bit of Q&A, what were the impacts on me or my business? First, I think the negative impact of doing the campaign was, it takes just a shit ton of time, right? It's a whole lot more than doing 3 VC or 20 VC presentations or something. It's a lot of work, and it's ongoing work, and it's repetitive work. It has to be done each week. The distribution process, yeah, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So someone who invests today, their cash may not be in my bank account for 3 to 4 weeks. So it takes some time. So if you need immediate cash, it's not necessarily a great choice. It's a bit more costly in financial reporting, obviously having to do the audits. There is transparency, so we file our financials and all of our information publicly once a year. So it is there to be seen. So if that bothers somebody in the company or within your company, you want to be secret, then that's probably not a great choice for you. Cost, yeah, it does cost a bit of money to raise it, but again, that's a balance off in your valuation and where you are. And like I said, kind of no lump sum investment. So if you're running a company, you're like, look, I need that, $5 million right now so I can spend it all at once in this big, scenario. You're not going to get it here. This stuff kind of trickles in month to month. So you're not going to get that big chunk. I'd say the positive impacts of my business, I've had a lot less dilution because the valuation I'm going to get through a public offering in this case is likely going to be better than a typical VC. And I certainly keep a lot more control of the company because I set the terms of the offering. So I can decide exactly what the terms of my common or preferred shares are that I'm listing. And I'm not necessarily going to be ground down by a VC who's going to want board seats, control, right of first refusal, all of these other kind of triggers that they'll put inside your operating documents. I think the pressure with the rhythm helped because it really makes us focus every single week. What have we done this week that's material and new? And it helps keep those weeks from slipping along, especially as a software company. Sometimes you can be heads down. You're like, all right, I need to get something to market and have something to talk about. Makes you a bit better at storytelling, I'll tell you about the company, because you have to distill it all for the campaign. And, you can find these interested investors. The social media following with my customers has been great. So would I do it again? Yes, I would. I'm glad I had the education I did going into it, talking to people who succeeded and failed. And I kind of wish someone had run through what I just did with me in the early days. It would have saved me a whole lot of time and frankly, a bit of money. So look, I'm opening up to Q&A on anything that you have. So what I encourage you first, by the way, and maybe I'll put this in the chat as well, for any of you who want to have introductions, and I've had a lot of emails so far, to the CEO of Start Engine or to any of the other resources, I'm going to send out I'm going to send out two things. I'm going to send out a URL to a Google form. Just do a click in there for me and send that to me, and then I will send a personal. So use that form for the referral request. I'll send a personal introduction to each one of these companies or Start Engine, whatever you like. I've kind of put check boxes in there. And then the only other thing I'll add is, I'd mentioned this MIT event. I've got a couple of seats left because we just expanded the registrations. We haven't blasted publicly yet that they're available. We had a wait list of 70. So if that's something you're interested, you can click there. And look, that said, I'm open for this. Hopefully we'll send a review out. If you enjoyed it, obviously give us a rating for the Entrepreneurship Network. And I'm willing to open up questions, anything anybody has. I don't know how you guys might want to manage this, Natalia, or maybe curating is best.
We have some questions in the chat. So the first one says, it seems that many Silicon Valley corporate lawyers advise against equity crowdfunding. Why?
Because they've always thought it was messy for the VCs. And again, this is a bit of a historical play. If you look at the experience they might have gained over the last 5, 6 years, these campaigns weren't common. People were thinking more like the Indiegogo stuff. So I think you're starting to see more and more very reputable firms that are raising tens or even, multiple tens of millions of dollars through this platform. But no doubt, if you're going to Sequoia and you're that kind of startup that's going to get that kind of funding from Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, you're not going to want to mess up your cap table that way. That's not the path for us in my business, why I chose it. Well, frankly, maybe you're not able to get VC money. We had a challenge with some VC when the market collapsed about 18 months ago, and we found a different path. So I just make sure you understand where you're going, because within some of those, kind of VC halls, especially the bigger firms, yeah, they don't necessarily like it.
Great, thank you. Another question. Can this dynamic be used to raise funds for a VC fund or VC/SVP type vehicle?
I've seen this used for a lot of different aspects. There are companies that are pulling together real estate deals and others. So I don't see why not. Essentially, you're raising funds as a limited, I would assume, into a limited pool. So I would talk to the platforms about that. I don't know what I don't know if that's been done before, but yeah, I think you'd have to check and see if that's covered under the Reg CF or Reg A.
Great. Another question from William. What's the cap table management side?
Time or type? I'm sorry.
Cap table management site. William?
Well, so again, with my cap table, I think I just gave the snapshot there. I'm not sure if the question came in after. So I do use cap table management software. It's just a lot easier. Like I said, we used to use Carta, and I will be putting all of my crowdfunding investors on there as well, so I can communicate with one big group. You can blast out one big email. Everyone will get the updates, and everyone has their digital shares. Because I have gotten feedback from a couple of investors that either kind of like, hey, where are my shares? How do I know what I have? And it doesn't seem the portal makes that super easy for them to figure out. And again, we hold the digital shares for them. The portal does not. They're not holding custody of those shares. They're just facilitating the investment. So we do still have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure all of that's organized, audited and well run for the investors. And by the way, for any of you that are wondering, one of my questions before I did this was, man, is this going to be just a huge pain in the ass with hundreds of people emailing me every stupid little question in the world, who maybe invested $200? I've probably had 3 emails from our 800 investors in the last year. So it's been absolutely wonderful from a management perspective. I've reached out to have communication with them, of course, but I'm not getting pummeled every day with questions.
Great. Initially, how much did you bring with your own network versus outreach to new investors?
Probably about the first 200-ish thousand, between some money I seeded in it, friends and family. I reached out to all of our existing angel investors, of which like 45 somewhat of my existing angel investors are all YPOers. So I emailed that group, and then everybody else put in a little bit of money just to give it momentum and get it going. So you don't want to start flat-footed. You definitely want to have at least, if you can, 150, 200 ready to go, and trickle it in mindfully, frankly. And this is, again, an art form. So just dumping it in on the first day isn't necessarily the best thing. You may just want to start to create a nice little momentum of it rolling forward. And there are games to play too, because sometimes when you dump a chunk in, you hit the most momentum page on the platform, and then Start Engine sends an email out to 1.5 million people, and then you get a ton more investment. So there are things to consider on gaming the system and making sure you kind of roll the money in at the right time.
Great. What would this format not be a good fit for?
Well, again, it's probably not a good fit if you want to do a VC investment down the run. Why? Because most likely your VC is going to have a better valuation on your company than your crowd equity funding folks did, unless you have some like massive momentum and you do a VC investment years later. But if the idea was, hey, I'm going to raise crowd equity funding for 9 months, and then I'm going to go for a VC round. The problem is, like I say, that valuation piece, which means you'll probably be doing a down round with the VC compared to your crowd equity funding. And that's not going to make your crowd equity funding people happy. And it just gets messy. And plus, again, the VCs don't really like a messy cap table with 800 people on it. Some do. I've still seen VCs go into companies that are that way. It really depends if they like it. But I think it becomes one more impediment. But look, at the end of the day, if your company is a super attractive investment, people are going to jump in anyway.
Good. Is it possible to raise money through crowdfunding for companies established out of the US?
It is if you have a U.S. entity. So the Reg CF and Reg A are restricted. Reg CF, I believe, is only the United States. Reg A, I believe, is also U.S. and Canada. But yet you would need an entity here. But you could be a foreign company doing business somewhere that's just operating in a U.S. shell.
Good. How do you arrive at the valuation?
Yeah, that's a toughie. How does anybody arrive at that? When we did that, we really looked at other companies in the space. We looked at a lot of other companies that were maybe similar in terms of time, traction, revenue on the crowdfunding platforms to see where we fit. We didn't want something that was, too ridiculous that it didn't make sense and would turn people off, or maybe a potential other investor would look. And keep in mind that, you still have flexibility. So for like YPOers who get in, I still have some YPOers who, want to get in on our company, and just to be frank, since we're on a YPO call, I give YPOers a discount on this valuation. So if any of you are interested, let me know. And what we do is we essentially issue additional shares. So you can still be very creative in how you bring investors in, and you might have a strategic or someone else. You can put them through the platform, have them invest, and you can also work a deal to give them extra shares as an advisor or something else, so that you can adjust that valuation. So there are ways you can move things around, so to speak, that then don't cause that crush on others.
Great. So we have another question from Christopher Herbert. Christopher, do you want to open your mic and ask a question?
Sure thing. This is awesome. So thank you so much for sharing.
You bet.
Target on how were you targeting the outreach to start engine investors, Facebook audience, purchase lists, et cetera? How do you think about reaching those people?
It's pure ads, like you would any of your products or anything else. So like you saw on that dashboard from the OmniKey company or from DNA Agency, they generate new ads creative almost every week. We push those out, we test them. It's pure paid advertising at this point. Obviously, we do a lot of these updates, like I'd mentioned on the platform. So you're trying to entice people who maybe either already invested to invest more, or other people who've been sitting on the fence and maybe just watching you for a month or two to invest now. So that's kind of where that rolls through. It's a combination. Like I say, we've discovered that 2 out of 3 of our investors were already registered on Start Engine, and 1 of them were new, meaning they were on Facebook, they saw what we did, they're like, wow, that's cool. Registered with Start Engine, then invested in us. And that's fun because that's just entire green fields in this case. So we can bring people who've never invested through the platform before and have them come to Build Club.
Just to double click there, is were you using like the Facebook ASC campaigns, these automated AI matching campaigns, or really going back to audiences, which kind of declined after iOS 14, just from a targeting standpoint?
Yeah, it did make a big impact with the iOS piece. And a decent amount of these investments do come through mobile. So it's been a combination of both. We experiment with all of these things. The real key have been the pixel audiences. So we have an audience with the OmniKey, like I'd mentioned, which are all the people on Start Engine, which is very important, right? That's basically our entire target community. But at the same side, DNA and others have other pixel audiences. For example, they worked on a campaign for a company called Boxable. I think they've raised like $100 million in crowdfunding. One of the most successful crowdfunded campaigns. They make essentially a collapsible or easy assembled homes out of Nevada. And that they have thousands of investors, and they have the pixel for that investor set. So there's a bunch of different audiences and pixel sets that I think matter, but really some of it's old school audience.
Amazing. We have Tim Gockman with some experience and questions. Tim, would you like to open your mic and share?
Yeah, thank you. So we've used crowdfunding before to raise for a individual real estate deal, and this is of interest because now we have a business that we want to raise equity for. And what I'm curious about is this: when we raised for the real estate deal, we had a lot of small investors all of a sudden become promoters for the project. They had a stake in the real estate deal, and they would tell this was a rental building. And they would tell people about it on social media, etc. Have you seen this in a meaningful way for your business?
I think that probably depends on the business, but yes. So it's, we've created now 800 advocates who, when I start to release more of our new digital products, can start to use those, advocate them, post them to social media, tell their friends. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this since I even founded the company is, we're here to serve small contractors. So in our business, we bring high tech to low tech people, right? So one of our products, for example, we're launching in the next week is a browser extension. So anyone who's surfing Home Depot or Lowe's, which, the two biggies here, they do 2.7 billion transactions a year, that someone can see instantly when they're surfing a product if in fact a different Home Depot store or a Lowe's store has the product they're looking at for cheaper. And you'd be surprised. I mean, there's a broad variance of price. So our goal is to empower small contractors and others to make better decisions, have more transparency, make more money. So we've always wanted them to be stakeholders. We always wanted to kind of democratize the success of our business and let the customers and people who use our tools make the money, and not just the Silicon Valley VCs. So yeah, we do see that as a big positive. And of course, the customer advocacy is always great.
Good. So we have finished the questions in the chat. So please feel free to open your mic and share a question if you have.
And if not, I'm happy to give you back part of your day. I think we're good. So look, fantastic. Thank you everybody for taking the time. Again, you'll probably get a survey on this. Hope you fill it out. Use this QR or the link if you'd like me to make any of those introductions for you. I'm happy to do a personal introduction. I think that's part of the fun of doing all this for YPOers. And if you're doing a campaign in the near future, good luck. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, anything I can do to help. And I hope to see you all around the YPO world soon.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks, everybody.